Good evening and welcome everyone to the Braver Angels National Forum on America's Deportation Policy. And everyone is coming into the room. We're going to give just a moment for everyone to get into the room. So this is the Braver Angels National Forum on America's Deportation Policy. Welcome to all. My name is David Lapp, and I am a co-founder of Braver Angels and honored to serve as the director of our Citizens Commission on Immigration. And I am joining tonight from my home in South Lebanon, Ohio, where 10 years ago, we had the first ever Braver Angels workshop. Tonight, we're here for a discussion about what America's deportation policy should be. Our agenda for tonight is first, we're going to look at the goals of tonight. We're going to hear from Braver Angels CEO Maury Giles, a couple community members with direct experience of the U.S. immigration system, national experts and leaders who are working together through the Braver Angels Immigration Policy Roundtable, and then members of Congress from both parties, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican from Pennsylvania, and Representative Tom Suozzi, Democrat from New York. Our speakers tonight don't all agree on what America's deportation policy should be, but they do agree that we must seek better understanding and work together to update and improve our immigration and deportation policies. And then we'll conclude with feedback from you all and a checkout question for our panelists, and that will be at the hour and 30-minute mark when we conclude. So next, let's start with what we're trying to accomplish here, our goals. The goals of tonight are that we delve into America's deportation policy and learn how people with differing views see the issue. Identify areas of common ground, and then learn something that might be helpful to others in our communities and the nation. Now, let me say just a word about the Citizens Commission on Immigration, which is hosting this event. So this is a Braver Angels initiative that got started in the 2024 Braver Angels Convention, at which 750 delegates, even number of red and blue delegates, and about 15% of independent delegates voted to prioritize immigration as a common ground issue for Braver Angels over the next couple of years. The goal is that Americans with differing views find common ground on immigration and encourage Congress to take bipartisan, long-term action to address our nation's immigration challenges. And there's three areas of focus: grassroots, grass tops, and Congress. And at the heart of the grassroots work are common ground workshops on immigration, and then followed by sharing the results with the local member of Congress. And then at the grass tops, we have the Immigration Policy Roundtable, some of whom we'll hear tonight. They're national leaders and experts from all across the ideological spectrum. There's about 25 key leaders who are meeting regularly to see what agreement they can find. And all of that, the work from the grassroots, the Common Ground workshops, and our other events, and the Immigration Policy Roundtable, all of that will inform a report to the nation in 2027. So with that, let me hand it over now to our CEO, Maury Giles, who will talk about courageous citizenship in our current moment. Maury, over to you.
Thank you so much, David, and thank all of you for joining us this evening. This is an incredibly important topic, and we'll hear a number of different perspectives tonight, including those from two congressmen on the front lines of this issue in DC. But, here we are again. After two politically motivated assassinations last fall, we gathered on a Sunday evening with over 2,000 Americans. We came together to discuss what happened, why it happened, and what it meant going forward at the time. And tonight, only a few months later, after two tragic deaths in Minneapolis, we're gathered again. Once more, over 2,000 have registered to come together and discuss what's happening, why it's happening, and what it means going forward. Intentions are high. People are angry. People are afraid. And opinions are very strong. Honestly, it seems like we can hardly have a conversation about immigration without strong sentiments about ICE or deportation policy. It's become another label to dictate how we treat each other, One comment now carries far more meaning than just the basic thoughts about immigration policy. By the way, I might add that most research shows that most Americans tend to agree on a number of things about immigration, as is the case with most of our divisive issues. But the reality is, in many cities, not just Minneapolis, people are experiencing this issue front and center in their streets and neighborhoods, among families and children, old and young. Imagine the conversations in those homes. Consider the emotions at play. At the same time, in many homes across the country tonight, someone's mother, father, spouse, partner, sister, or brother is coming home from their job as an ICE agent tonight. Imagine those conversations. Consider those emotions. After Alex Preddy's death, a coworker of his said, "There's no reason for a guy like that to be dead, let alone to be killed by agents of a government that employed him." I believe we can all agree that violence and death are tragedies that no one wants to happen on any side of this issue. But right now, it's important to acknowledge that there are very real reasons that both shooting deaths did happen. This is a topic that is very difficult to talk about, but it's one we have to be able to discuss right now if we're going to move forward. Some people in a moment like this may choose to stand in favor of deportation policies, of the actions of the administration. Others may choose to resist that through various methods. At Braver Angels, by design, our members have different ways of seeing the world. They've experienced it in different ways and hold different perspectives on policy solutions. Our focus is to inspire and equip Americans to practice something that we call courageous citizenship. Courageous citizenship is owning our role in the American experiment as members of this society. It's about owning your own perspective, seeking truth, courageously sharing your perspective, and staying at the table. It's having the courage to listen with curiosity and to disagree accurately. Courageous citizenship is the space between showing up with cowardice and showing up with recklessness. It's the sweet spot right in the middle. It's having the courage to seek common ground and build from there to create solutions together. Intense conflict, like what we're experiencing right now, requires an equal force in response to be resolved. And that force can take various different forms. It could be domination through power and control, or connection through patience, perseverance, and perspective. I believe it's that simple. At Braver Angels, we choose connection over domination. As a people, to get to solutions that last on immigration, we have to recognize that our individual choices are what matter. No party or official or institution is going to make this change or solve this issue alone. Institutions can lead by inviting and teaching, or they can, as many seem to do right now, drive anger and division. But we can choose to go against the grain. We can find those we disagree with, as we've done tonight. We can bring ideas to the table, as you'll hear tonight. And we can approach one another with dignity rather than contempt, as you will observe tonight. With curiosity is how we should approach each other rather than trying to win or to try score points or to dominate. That's what we call the Brave Angels way. I hope tonight you will seek to listen with curiosity, that you will learn something and become a little more comfortable with uncertainty in your own views. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Back to you, David.
Thank you, Mari. And now I'm going to turn it over to Rena Bernards, who is the founder of the Common Ground Workshop at Braver Angels and a key leader at the Citizens Commission on Immigration, to moderate this first panel with community members. So Rena, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce community members who have experienced the immigration system in their own lives, and we'll be telling you about that. Jorge Pineda and David Izquierdo will speak about what is at the heart of America's deportation policy for them, and what is an experience or relationship that led them to this. And after that, we'll come back and hear about a policy that each of them thinks will improve America's deportation system. So welcome. It's so good to have both of you here. We're going to start with Jorge Pineda. Jorge was raised by a naturalized citizen and watched his biological father be deported in September 2025 for the third and final time. He's an active member of the Democratic Party in his home community, and he participated in a Braver Angels Common Ground workshop on immigration in November 2025 and shared the story of his father's recent deportation. And Jorge lives in Utah, and welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. At the heart of the immigration issue for me is definitely discretion. My father was picked up and deported after being rounded up in Henderson City, Las Vegas. I live in Washington County. I actively track and communicate with detainees and their families, just like mine, that are being affected by the current immigration enforcement. If my father had been in my hometown, he could have been released the very same weekend. We're seeing inconsistent enforcement enforced all throughout this country. And as a result of that, people who could have been freed are instead deported. My experience is very personal. I've grown up playing soccer around DACA recipients my whole life. My entire family is riddled with the immigration system. At the heart of it, there is inconsistent policies that are enforced or not enforced. And where less than 40% of the detainees being held in my hometown have a criminal record, and those with a criminal record are held for longer periods of time than those without one, I find that it's unfair. We are providing resources to those who have committed crimes, but providing nothing to those who have not. Those who have committed a civil statute against the United States should not have to be torn away from their families. My father was picked up and deported 3 days before my little sister's 8th birthday and subsequently missed my 26-year-old brother's funeral after being deported. I am now tasked with carrying my brother's ashes to him in Yautepec, Morelos, which is where my family is from. The real experiences that families live through and face is one of instant panic and fear. They are told you now have less than a month, a week, 2 weeks to move homes, to find a new place of work because everything must be scrubbed. Their lives are no longer safe to live if a loved one has been picked up. I find it important that we reach a common and consistent discretionary tactics used in our enforcement and immigration policy in order to ensure that we are truly providing fair and equal justice to all persons in this country. I'll see you the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. And now we are turning to David Izquierdo. And David is a retired border patrol agent with more than 24 years of service. Having worked across a wide range of assignments from the remote stretches of the US-Mexico and US-Canada borders to the dense urban environments of South Florida. David played a key role in the planning and development of Operation Streamline. He has participated in 2 Braver Angel Common Ground workshops on immigration, and he lives in Florida. Welcome, David.
All right. So at the heart of America's deportation policy for me is pretty much what was already said, is how inconsistent our immigration policies and even the enforcement part of it is applied throughout the United States. Now, for me, in a perfect world, I would say that it needs to be applied equally with everybody. No exception, no selective tailoring of enforcement or deportations, which is what causes a lot of the problems, I think, in this country, is that inconsistency that when it's seen from outside, people don't really know what to make out of it. There's a lot of confusion. A lot of people don't know exactly what the rules are or what they're not as far as policies. So it is true that depending on where you're at, location-wise, it could very much differ the way you're going to be treated if you're here legally, as opposed to in other locations where it might be a little bit more aggressive. Some areas You can live there illegally and never see immigration. You live illegally in places like Miami, El Paso. If somebody crosses and stays in that area, they're very likely going to encounter immigration. So that's what one of the issues is. For immigration is not necessarily enforced. The law is not enforced consistently across the nation, from, like I said, from geography to even probably areas that are more politically sided on one end than another. You could see that difference. A red state, like the state of Florida, is more likely to be more aggressive when it comes to immigration enforcement, as opposed to possibly California or Minnesota, as we're seeing right now. So even though it's a federal issue, there tends to be a lot of local that is tends to influence how a lot of immigration is enforced.
David,
So yeah.
I wonder if you could say a personal experience that got you to this place and this perspective.
Okay. Now, basically, the reason I've arrived to this conclusion is because I worked for the Border Patrol for almost 25 years, and I enforced immigration from people who just initially crossed to people who have been here for a while to even legal permanent residents. I saw a lot of law breaking. I saw a lot of inconsistencies with how many people were addressing their illegal status in the United States. So I'm 100% for enforcement, but it needs to be equally enforced because it caused a lot of struggle and challenges when we're enforcing our immigration laws.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to go to the second question to Jorge. What is a policy that you support that you think would improve America's deportation policy?
I turn to my local Washington County Sheriff's Office for that answer. They are currently using discretion. So within my small county of around 200,000 people, we have 16 total enforcement officers. 13 of them are Washington County sheriffs. The other 3 are full-time ICE agents. Our Washington County Sheriff's Office is handling these cases with complete discretion. So we've met with them and have confirmed that they are not picking up women or men with families. And if they do pick them up, they release them with subsequent follow-ups to ensure that, one, they can still support and continue to be there for their families, but to ensure that they are abiding by the law. Where myself and David are agreeing on is the inconsistent enforcement. When my local sheriff's office is able to use this type of discretion that is much more humane and actually maintains a stable and much more just community and communal safe space, I find it abhorrent where not even 45 minutes, 2 hours from where I live, it's the exact opposite. Anything and everything goes. So one policy I support absolutely to its core is not rounding up people with families and not rounding up women and children. I believe that our enforcement operations should be targeted towards those who do commit violent crimes. And I wholeheartedly believe that we should not be holding those who are found, charged, and detained for violent crimes, along with their immigration violations. We should not be holding these people for extended periods of time while rushing to get out people with simple civil violations with no criminal charges. I've seen people with simply a civil charge be sent out of this country in as little as 2 days, and people who are still being held and menacing other detainees as a result of their violent criminal charges. I believe that at the heart of it, the system is not working as intended to protect those that seek it and to remove those that deserve it. I believe that an inconsistent indiscretion that's used across this country should be modeled after Washington County. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. David, will you tell us what you think would be a policy that would improve our deportation program policy?
Okay, so being present in the United States is illegal. We know that. So what's a program right now that I think is at play that might actually help address those that are here illegally without requiring these roundups? And for example, the CBP home mobile application, I do support that. If you go through this application, you do what's got to be done through the application, and you do depart, you would be allowed to come back in at a later date. And with that, I also support that. Yes, even though some might oppose, I believe that to make it easier, we do have to provide that financial incentive for those families and those people to actually encourage them to use the app and don't go back home. But yeah, the incentive of using that app will be that they can come back orderly with the papers in hand. Another policy that I really think needs to be strengthened is our policies relating to employers employing illegal immigrants. E-Verify needs, in my opinion, needs to be mandatory nationwide. Not only does it cut the magnet, which is drawing in the illegal immigration, it also holds these employers accountable, that they can't just pay lower wages, not provide Social Security benefits, be violating not only labor laws, but also Social Security laws, OSHA laws, and they know they can get away with it because those those employees are less willing to actually file reports against them. So I believe E-Verify needs to be implemented across the board, 100% by every single employer. No cutouts based on size of companies or employees, from one employee to
Thank you
300 or
very
400.
much, David. I want to thank both of you, Jorge and David, for participating in the Immigration Commission work and attending Common Ground workshops and being a part of your community, a real model for the rest of the members of Braver Angels. And so happy to have both of you among us.
Thank you, Rena.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
We're now going to have a panel of the Immigration Policy Roundtable. Let me tell you a little bit about this roundtable. Braver Angels has brought together experts, people who have been working on the issue of immigration from a variety of perspectives together for meetings in Washington, D.C. And I have participated as a moderator in a few of these meetings. What I noticed is at the beginning, there was some reluctance, and they're sitting together with people that they have been in political fights with for decades. And over the course of the year, there are friendships that have been formed, and there have been some common ground forged. So this has really been a very important experience. And I'm pleased to have the panelists, the four panelists, who I will introduce. We have Gabby Pacheco, Peter Scarry, Jim Robb, Teresa Cardinal Brown. And they will be answering the same questions. What's at the heart of the immigration deportation policy for them? And tell us an experience or relationship that led them to it. And then we will get to policy. So, welcome to all of you. We're still looking for Peter. Anyway, we're going to start with Gabby. Gabby Pacheco is president and CEO of the Dream.us, the nation's largest college and career success program for undocumented immigrant youth. Born in Ecuador, she came to the United States as a child. Her parents entered with legal status and were pursuing a religious visa when a clerical error by their attorney left the family in legal limbo. After graduating high school in 2003, Gabby began her activism, later helping catalyze the movement that led to DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. She lives in Florida. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you so much, Rena, and it's so wonderful to be here with all of you tonight. I wanted to start by talking about the heart of immigration's deportation policy. And practically in my mind, the way I see it is that it's a system that it's been created around vulnerability and it punishes it. So let me just give you a little bit of context. We have built an immigration system that is so complex, so backlogged, and so limited in legal pathways that millions of people who come here to work and survive are left without status. And not because they've committed violence or posed any threats to anyone, but because the system makes it almost impossible for them to get in line, right? What we ask people to do. There are two primary people and immigrants, right? There's those people who are unauthorized and who are border crossers. and they've crossed without authorization. And then the second group of people are those who enter legally with a visa and are overstayers. Nearly half of those, about 45% of the unauthorized population, are visa overstayers, and the other is border crossers. According to Pew, and I know this is debatable, but in 2023, they said there was about 14 million people living in the US without an immigration status. And what's often missed in this conversation about unauthorized immigrants is that most of them have been living here, two-thirds of them, for more than 10 years. So they're deeply rooted in their communities, they're raising families, like Jorge's family, they're working, they're paying taxes, and the vast majority of them are doing it without a chance to really regularize their status. So the system treats people very differently. I was able to, after 30 years, become a citizen because I was in essence, visa overstayer. And when I got married, I was able to have my husband petition for me. But those who are here and came through the border can't do that. And if they do have somebody to petition for them, they usually have to leave the country, be out for sometimes years and over a decade to be able to come back. So, because of this, our immigration policy ends up doing three things at once. One, it benefits from people's labor and contributions, it denies them basic legal protections, and then it profits from their detention. And this is something real, and people talk about it. But our immigration systems are run by private prison companies like Core Civic and Geo Group, and they have federal contracts worth billions of dollars. So there is a clear incentive, in essence, to detain human beings and profit from them. So I just want to be very crystal clear that I believe every sovereign nation has the right to set borders and enforce their laws. And we all can agree about that. But there's a misleading narrative that our deportation system is primarily about protecting the public from dangerous people. And the data tells us something very, very differently. The data tells us that immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, have lower crime rates than native-born Americans, and immigration status, as we know also, it's a civil violation, not a criminal offense. So the idea that deportation policy is about bad actors simply doesn't match that. Really quickly, I want to tell you my experience. So in 2006, I personally experienced an ICE raid. They came to our home without a judicial warrant. It was before sunrise. They used a false pretense, claiming that they were looking for a Maria woman who had applied for citizenship 6 times. And later we learned that realistically, they were there for me. They detained my parents and my sisters, and when they didn't find me, they told my family that if I didn't turn myself in, they would separate them and send them to different detention centers across the country. When I did turn myself in, and I confronted the ICE agent and I cited the law, telling them they were wrong. The ICE officer laughed in my face and said, "We are the law, we make the law." That moment for me reveals something fundamental, and it's that enforcement authority does not equal more authority. And no agency, federal, state, or local, is above the Constitution. When the law is applied without humanity or accountability, families and people suffer, our community suffer, and our country suffers. And I personally know ICE agents. I have a childhood friend and a front door neighbor. Being an ICE agent doesn't make someone good or bad, but doing unconstitutional and inhumane things causes real harms, and we have to be honest about that. So at its core, America's deportation policy today is less about crime or safety and more about a broken system that creates vulnerability and then punishes it. And without allowing others to profit from the human suffering. And if we continue to do that, we're going to be going down a really bad place, not just for the immigrants and the communities that they live in, but as we have been seeing in our country right now, for all its citizens.
Thank you, Gabby. Our next speaker is going to be Peter Skerry. Peter is professor of political science at Boston College and has been researching and writing about immigration issues for more than 30 years. His work on immigration includes stints at the American Enterprise Institute and at the Brookings Institute, where he co-authored Breaking the Immigration Stalemate: From Deep Disagreements to Constructive Proposals. He serves as chair of the Braver Angels Citizens Commission on Immigration Policy Roundtable and lives in Massachusetts. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Rena, and thank you all for attending. So I begin my remarks mindful that deportation operations can be extremely, perhaps unavoidably unsettling, even violent proceedings. As such, the apprehension of deportees must be undertaken according to established routines and lawful procedures. For example, with appropriate warrants from designated authorities, and law enforcement officials must remain attentive to not needlessly disrupting the neighborhoods in which deportees are likely found among law abiding residents who may themselves be immigrants living here legally or even as citizens. That these are not easy undertakings, I can attest from personal experience. About 25 years ago, as a researcher, I accompanied INS agents on several such raids in Southern California. These involved forced entry into dwellings where residents refused to open up to officials. Excuse me. The resulting chaos when the doors were forced open was invariably from screaming women and children, while the targeted individuals, typically males, had fled. Also impacted, of course, were the many neighbors in typically densely populated neighborhoods. What I have just described is the work of a very different agency, federal agency, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, from today's Department of Homeland Security. Not only was the INS a smaller and less funded agency at that time, but in the years leading up to 9/11 was more attentive to legal norms and procedures as well as community reaction and support, despite the drama of what I just described. For example, in the late 1990s, after several dramatic crashes, INS suspended high-speed automobile pursuits of suspected illegal aliens in heavily populated parts of Southern California. Now, when I just mentioned the impacts of enforcement efforts on neighbors, it highlights that such activities are alarming because even undocumented immigrants quickly develop ties with neighbors from the surrounding community. In other words, immigrants, illegal as well as legal, assimilate to their environs and adapt to many of the ways of their immigrant and non-immigrant neighbors. Such typically uneducated, unskilled immigrants do not assimilate all along possible dimensions. For example, speaking English is one difficult path for many to pursue, but over time, they adapt to many aspects of life in America, their children more so. Yet such immigrants nevertheless pose challenges for themselves and others in their new settings. They may assimilate to aspects of American society that are highly dysfunctional, for example, such as youth gangs. But such immigrants are here first and foremost because it has been in the interest of many Americans, either because these immigrants validate our understanding of America as a nation of immigrants, or, more compellingly, because they are useful as home health aides, gardeners, roofers, and other such workers. Nevertheless, such immigrants pose burdens on others, especially the less affluent living in neighborhoods to which immigrants are drawn. In such environs, the newcomers' neighbors might be older residents who raise their own families there and worry about the inevitable changes brought on by new arrivals, whether weakened neighborhoods, ties, or diminished property values. Such immigrants, legal as well as illegal, impose burdens on the neighborhood institutions, schools, churches, hospitals, and social services. All immigrants pay taxes, but they and their children also impose fiscal burdens over generations. Over generations, this calculus shifts. But for a generation or more, immigrants pose serious fiscal challenges to state and local governments. So we've been dealing with these issues for decades now. The challenges posed by immigration of the type and scale that we've been experiencing over the period are real and substantial. I'll say more later.
In about 15 seconds or half a minute and sum it up?
I just did.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Jim Robb. Jim is Vice President of Alliances at Numbers USA, the largest membership-based immigration group in the world. and an organization that advocates for less immigration. Jim has been working on immigration issues for 30 years and was instrumental in the defeat of the 2013-2014 Senate Gang of Eight immigration bill. He is the author of Political Migrants, Hispanic Voters on the Move. He lives in Virginia and works in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Wow, what a tense time it's been for our country. I'm glad we're all here speaking, the Braver Angel family, with this complicated issue that's brought a lot of distress. The heart of the issue for me, it's related to immigration, of course. Immigration, it's about immigration, but it's about a subset, right? It's about people who are here illegally. Now, the Constitution gives all the power on immigration and naturalization to the U.S. Congress. They've got a monopoly on that. And then Congress passes laws, and the laws then have to be enforced by the executive branch and backed up by the courts. So the population of illegal persons or illegal immigrants in this country, it's shot up in the last few years. It's in the at least the mid-teens, and so these are millions of people that Congress has said are subject to deportation. Now, there are proceedings that have to occur before they would actually be deported. But my point is, the Constitution gives the Congress the power. The Congress has decided who can come in and who can't come in. These individuals came in not outside of the law. The agencies of the government are required to remove them according to the procedures outlined by Congress. All right. Does the public support this? Well, when it comes to illegal immigrants who've committed crimes, it's not even controversial. 73% of American voters, according to a Harvard-Harris poll, that's done with Harvard University and various and pollsters. It says 60% of Democrats support deporting illegal immigrants who committed crimes, and 69% of independents and 90% of Republicans. So 73%, not controversial. And then the other thing, this might surprise some. It asked the question, deporting all immigrants who are here illegally. Harvard-Harris asked this. And it found that 52% of voters are for that. That's every single one. So I'm in between those two figures are people who probably want to deport people who've come here in recent years, people who are less attached to the country, et cetera, et cetera. But deportation in itself doesn't seem to be unpopular. The tactics of ICE in Minneapolis has caused a few people to rethink this, or a lot of people to rethink this. And of course, the administration has already made big changes, sending Tom Homan in, and the man who was there before has been sent on home. And it maybe have been needlessly confrontational at points. I think so. I think the state governments and cities who say they won't turn the criminals that they do have. These are people who are criminals according to the states and local governments because they're in their jails and they've been sentenced. Tom Homan, who was sent there by the president, said, just turn over those criminals to you say are criminals, and we'll leave the state. So that's an issue. And finally, what's personal about it for me? I didn't really think much about deportation. I work in broad categories of immigration policy with Congress. I hadn't had that much personal experience with it. But then my next door neighbors at my old neighborhood, we're in Alexandria, Virginia, this nice retired couple had a 40-year-old son who was he got into a lot of trouble. He had some drug issues. He had some behavioral problems. Um, and my wife and I tried to help him, and a lot of people tried to help him. Well, anyway, he was trying to clean himself up. One night he was standing at a bus station or stand that's like on the street and has a little enclosure, and in suburban Maryland, a suburb of Washington, D.C. And these guys come along in cars doing street racing very, very fast. And one lost control of his vehicle, hit the bus little stall that my neighbor was on, and crushed him. He fell into a coma and died a couple of weeks later. And then I found out that the man who was driving it was not, he was an illegal immigrant, not supposed to be in the country. And then it got a little personal for me, because, my neighbor didn't deserve to die because he was standing in a bus station or bus stop. And that person shouldn't have been there.
Can you sum up?
Yeah, that's it. The person shouldn't have been there. Congress says who shouldn't be here. The laws have to be enforced.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next and final part of the panel is Teresa Cardinal Brown. She has been working in the immigration policy space for over 30 years. Her work includes stints in the Department of Homeland Security in both the George W. Bush administration and the Barack Obama administration, as a policy advisor to U.S. Customs and Border Protection in the George W. Bush administration, and as a director for immigration and cross-border policy for the Bipartisan Policy Center. She lives in Virginia and works in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Teresa.
Thanks so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who has signed in here. I think, as Jim said, there's a lot of emotions running very high right now in this country around this issue. I think at the heart of it for me is the need that we have, this ideal that we have of we need to balance justice and mercy. Justice says that our laws should be abided by and there should be consequences when you don't. In our immigration system, as Jim said, Congress has decided who's allowed to come and how they can come, and what happens when they come when they're not supposed to be here, or they stay and do things after they're supposed to leave. The problem, as I see it, and this is something that I really did experience when I worked at Customs and Border Protection and DHS, is that the government is charged with enforcing these laws in a country that frankly is very ambivalent about having them enforced. Witness the different perspectives we have here today. Many people in this country would like to see, we're hearing it now, no ICE, no enforcement. People who are undocumented should be given a way to stay, legalize them. Other people would like to see immigration enforced and say, well, if we do that, how do we ensure that we don't just have more undocumented people in the future? The challenge from a policy perspective is that we have been in that place that sort of nothing is changing, the status quo, people remain illegally, and then they do stay 10 years and they build up families. And then enforcing the law in communities becomes difficult and generates tensions. And that in turn causes stress both for the people that are in those situations. And I would say that you have law enforcement officers who are responding equally. Who starts what and depends on every situation. But what I will say here, and what what brings me to this, is the need to figure out a way to balance these two things. Whatever you think of the current administration's policies toward deportation, the fact of the matter is that these actions have forced this country to have a conversation that has been needed to have for decades. And my hope is that it will force this conversation in Congress, which ultimately has the authority to decide what the laws are and how they should be enforced. And they have been unwilling to legislate in the area of immigration, other than piling money into border and now into ICE, but in really addressing the system that Gabby mentioned, that Peter mentioned, that Jim mentioned, that has had people entering the country and working here and developing lives and no way for them to correct their status. And so that's what I hope, that Congress will take this moment and look at what's happening in the country and say, okay, now we finally need to do something about it. We need to come together. And the purpose of this commission, the purpose of the Immigration Policy Roundtable, the Common Ground workshops, everything Braver Angels is doing is to try to help Congress figure out what it is that Americans want to see. What are the policies that people can agree on to stop the fighting and start the problem solving? So that's where it's in it for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. We are now going to hear from each of you about a policy you support that you think would improve America's deportation policy. What is something you would support? And each of you will have 2 minutes, a little less than we originally thought, running a little late, but if you can do it in 2 minutes, that would be great. And we'll start with Gabby.
Thank you. Such an important conversation that we're having tonight, and grateful to have all of you here listening. So I think what makes America special and what truly sets us apart is really what our founders believed this country should be governed, not by the whims of a king or chaos or lawlessness, but by fairness and justice. And I think we can all agree on that. So I want to say 4 things. First, I want to be clear that improving America's deportation system does not mean expanding our deportation system. The amount of money that is being put is ridiculous, and it's just out of line with what I think everyday Americans believe in. And I think we need to make it more fair, more constitutional, and aligned with our values and with the data. That starts prioritizing real threats to public safety, not families, workers, or longtime community members. The second is that we must fix the front end of the system by creating real legal pathways and addressing massive backlogs. You cannot deport your way out of a broken system. We need legal pathways for longtime residents. We need work visas. We need to ensure that, as Jorge was talking about, and David, employers, right, who are benefiting from immigrants' work. We need to reform that. The third is that we need to end the inhumane and costly detention model we've normalized. Every single one of us, me, you, every taxpayer, and even immigrants, are funding the prolonged detention of immigrants, often months at a time, even when they pose no danger to any one of us. We must end private and for-profit detention centers. Companies like Geo Group and CoreCivic, as I mentioned before, are making billions of dollars detaining immigrants, creating financial incentives to lock up people longer. No one's freedom and no one's family unity should ever be tied to corporate profit model. And finally, and most fundamentally, we must enforce the Constitution, even in immigration enforcement. No matter who you are, what your immigration status is, the Constitution protections must apply to everyone. This means, as Peter said, judicial warrants, no administrative shortcuts there, due process, access to legal counsel, and real accountability when enforcement agencies violate the law. No one should be above the law. And immigration enforcement cannot operate as a parallel justice system where the Constitution is optional. If the United States of America, if our beautiful nation truly wants to be a nation of laws, then those laws must apply to everyone, and they must be applied with fairness, humanity, and integrity.
Thank you, Gabby. Our next panelist is Peter Scarry. Peter, some policies that you support. 2 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Rena. So it seems like we've got two agendas on the table, one about deportation and one about immigration policy more generally. I'll try to address both quickly, very quickly, and necessarily cursorily. In terms of uh, deportation and ICE, I think it's very clear that we have to uh, uh, go back and deal seriously with the training of ICE officials, ICE personnel. We can't put up any longer with the kinds of people that have been put out on the streets to enforce laws that clearly they don't understand or don't want to understand. That's the result of poor training and massive infusions of personnel and money that have to be reined in. Um, we have to, at the same time, make sure we have better relations between ICE and local authorities, which I think would follow from reforms that we need to do vis-a-vis ICE itself. We have to do something about agents wearing masks or at least not being identified, and to curtail that kind of activity. All sorts of reforms like that vis-a-vis ICE and deportation itself. With regard to immigration more generally, we need to initiate mandatory and universal e-verify so that all employers are subjected to that. The demand for immigrant labor of legal or otherwise it needs to be disciplined, and the only way we can do that is to be serious about e-verify. We need to deal with the backlogs that Gabby suggested, perhaps not as expansively as she suggested, I would think, but certainly we need to deal with the DACA recipients and get them citizenship, and to do something about the millions of people who are here on undocumented status over long periods of time, who are here basically because we've let them be here and benefit from their presence, albeit at the same time vilifying them. I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Jim, your turn.
Yes, thank you. Great perspectives from everyone. So I think if we want less deportations, we have to go upriver and make enforcement the easy way. Do the easy kind of enforcement. E-verify, which is in place now, it's been operating successfully for a quarter century. It could be made mandatory by a very simple legislation in Congress for every U.S. business. And by the way, this is not revolutionary change. It would be evolutionary change, because you can only e-verify new employees. So gradually, as people go into new jobs, people will be weeded out who don't have legal right to work in this country. It's so much better than going on the street and nabbing someone. It's much better. You just discourage them. People say, "Oh, I guess I was misled. How easy it is to get jobs here." And the other thing is the employers. We need to crack down on the employers much more. We've got a lot of these very large employers of illegal immigrants who get away with it, and a lot of them need to get the perp walk, and because they're breaking the law knowingly, and that's a felony, I think, and they need to go to jail. And we would discourage illegal hiring, because the root of the matter is America's hooked on cheap labor, undercutting our own citizens and legal immigrants as well, of all ethnicities. So it's unfair. It's anti-worker. We can do it further upstream and then not have near as many of these unpleasant and sometimes violent scenes. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Teresa.
I think that there's merit in all of the policies that have been said. I think a couple of things. One is we need to give immigrants the ability to get their status legal. There's a lot of talk about legalization, amnesty programs, but the reality is that we used to have pathways where people like Gabby were able to, through some ways, get into the regular immigration system, even though she had a history of being undocumented in the United States. But we took most of those laws out in the 1990s and instituted these new penalties for being undocumented that basically said, if you stay in the United States more than a year in undocumented status and then leave, you can't come back for a decade, even if you have a sponsor, a family member, a legal way to come back, you can't. And what that ended up doing, instead of deterring people from staying, is it locked people into the country. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many undocumented immigrants who have been here so long. If we provide an avenue where people aren't locked in like that, the number of people who are undocumented who might have a legal pathway in our existing system could be a lot of people, but for these bars that exist. So one of the things we could do is revisit that, because it didn't work out the way the writers of it thought. It didn't work as an enforcement mechanism. And providing immigrants a way on their own to get their status correct is one of those things that I think most Americans understand, right? We want people to have the ability to get on the right side of the law, and yet we've created ways that they can't. So in addition to everything else that was said, I would suggest that we need to revisit some of those things, because the penalties are not preventing undocumented immigration. They are in some ways in reinforcing it.
Thank you, Teresa. We have one more thing to do before we hear the congressional reps that have come to talk to us. And what I would like you to answer, each of you about 30 seconds, what's something that you heard that was common ground from the four of you, the two community panelists? What's something that strikes you that where there's some common ground here? Somebody want to start? Jim, go ahead. You're muted.
I think the common ground I heard is that I think the common ground I heard is that Congress needs to act because our laws are 30 years old mostly, and some of them are 50 years old, and a few a bit older than that. And so the laws need to be updated, and I think we all agree on that.
Thank you. Who's next?
Peter, you want to go?
Go ahead, Teresa.
I think it's fair to say that all of us agree that the tactics and the way we're seeing immigration enforced in this country right now doesn't align with, I think, a lot of our values. Whether you agree that immigration should be enforced strictly or not, strict doesn't have to mean inhumane. And I think that that's one of the things we're seeing, is this idea that in order to enforce immigration laws strictly, you have to have violence and abusive tactics and coercive tactics. And I think that's not necessarily true. I think there are ways for us to enforce the laws without resorting to the kinds of violence and aggressiveness that we have seen. And I think definitely we agree that needs to be pulled back.
Peter.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with what Teresa just said. Also, what Jim indicated about E-Verify being universally enforced, and I think the other two panelists agreed with that. And I think the point Jim made about Congress acting is something we all can agree on too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I heard the same thing, that we need to improve our country's deportation system and move from a model rooted in fear, punishment, and profit to one grounded in the law, in dignity, and humanity. And what I also heard is that we need a system that recognizes the law, recognizes the needs, but also doesn't see people as just labor. And then the last thing is that we need to pass laws, and hopefully we can pass laws such as the DREAM Act. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for your participation and also for everything you're doing to further the work of the Commission on Immigration, the roundtable, and you guys have been a real asset to our organization. So thank you. And I am now going to turn it over to David.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our panelists. We're now going to hear from a couple of members of Congress who are here with us. And for this, I'm going to go back to Maury Giles, our CEO. Maury, over to you.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank the dialogue we've had so far has been great. We're going to bring on Representative Tom Suozzi, Democrat from New York, Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican from Pennsylvania, and we're going to now have a discussion together about the reality of what they're facing. And one of the things that we want to be able to do together with them is to have a discussion around the reality of what it's like to be dealing with this. Now, I've been privileged to be able to get to know both of you a little bit more over the last little bit. I don't think any of us would have to be reminded of the fact that you have a lot going on and it's a Friday evening. And I know there's no controversial issues or difficult things in Congress going on right now. So I'm sure you had nothing else to do, but I appreciate greatly you being here tonight, both of you. To get started, not everyone here tonight is going to know what the Problem Solvers Caucus is. You each come and represent your district, but you've made a choice to do something that I know is not an easy role and maybe not necessarily popular with everyone, to be able to jump on a bipartisan caucus. And so if I can start with you, Representative Suozzi, tell us why it is that you chose to not only join the Problem Solvers Caucus, but to co-chair it. What does that really mean for you as a member of Congress? And quite frankly, as a human being choosing to be a member of Congress?
You know, the first time that I went to Congress in January of 2017, I had just come off a campaign, and I was campaigning when I would do like little meetings at people's houses and things like that. And I'd say, you know what I want to do when I go to Congress? I want to create a band of doers, a group of people who work together to actually get things done. Because I can tell you that being in politics is not worth it unless you actually accomplish things. And so I don't like, just getting elected is not worth it. I want to get stuff done. And I came to Congress and there was a group already formed. It hadn't really been that functioning, called the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is right now it's 50 members of Congress, half Democrats, half Republicans. And our goal is to try and find common ground. Very tough to do in this environment. It's so toxic. It's so hard to get people to spend the time. There's a lot of cynicism. A lot of my constituents are like, hey, why are you being so Pollyannish, and trying to work across party lines? But there was also a lot of people who's like, please work together. Why can't you get something done? All this fighting, they're like, what about me? What are you doing for me? So I'm just committed to getting stuff done. And that's the only reason I'm in politics really now, is it's not worth it other than getting things done and helping people.
What about you, Representative Fitzpatrick? What's your reality on this?
Yeah, so I came into Congress having never held office before. I was a career FBI agent, and our crime solving model was always to particularly with time sensitive crime cases. I always use a kidnapping example. We surrounded the table with people from completely different backgrounds. We wanted people to identify our blind spots and learn from different life experiences that cause people to view their life and problems and solutions through their own prism. And we actively sought diversity of thought to save people, to save people's lives. So the Problem Solvers to me was essentially the legislative version of that. If you look at the continuum of caucuses in Congress, far right, you got the Freedom Caucus, far left, you got the Squad, you got a bunch of sort of inching towards the center, but there's only one two-party group. We're the only one. And not only are we the only two-party group, we have a 1-to-1 D to R ratio. We support two-party solutions. The only bills that we can endorse, according to our bylaws, are two-party bills that are introduced by a Democrat and Republican member of our group. So we believe that results in the best policy. It's also the most sustainable policy. It's not going to get uprooted when the pendulum swings in the other direction, as it always has and always will in American politics. Basically common sense, taking the same approach to government that all of us take in every other aspect of our lives. It's not hard. It's not complicated. And we wish We wish we didn't need a Problem Solvers Caucus. We wish it was just called Congress. We're not there right now, but that's our goal, is to get to everybody being, pragmatic and not an ideologue that's rattling a saber.
Yeah. Well, appreciate that. And it's one of the things that we at Braver Angels appreciate, because our one-to-one balance is the same model that we try to take with Americans across the country. Let's now pivot into immigration specifically then, because you heard from our expert panel. We had a community panel, an expert panel from different points of view. You heard the reference of Congress acting, right? We all hear the sound bites on this issue on a regular basis through the social media. But would like to be able to give the benefit to everyone here of having the two of you here to understand a little more of the reality beyond the sound bites and beyond the performative politics. What is actually happening about this issue in particular right now? And so I'd like to start with you, Representative Fitzpatrick. If you could tell us, share a little about the reality as a member of Congress right now dealing with immigration and deportation policy while all of this is going on around in the country and the performative politics, the news media, the outrage cycle. What's actually happening in DC on this right now? And help us maybe hold the curtains back a little bit, look behind it to see better understanding of what it's actually like on this issue right now.
Yeah, the two most frustrating points for me in Congress have been immigration and healthcare. Two of the most convoluted systems. Healthcare is more complicated than immigration. Both we know how to fix. Immigration, we absolutely know how to fix. We know what it takes to fix it. We know what the right policy is. But politics and sort of the structural deficiencies in our system have prevented it from getting done. And I also think that folks that are trying to go too big, too quick end up with nothing. I always like to make sports analogies for everything. In this case, I would say home run hitters always have the highest strikeout rate. When you're swinging for the fences and you're trying to get it all in one swing, you have the highest strikeout rate. If you're happy with incremental change, incremental progress, and you're hitting your sacrifice flies and bunts and singles and doubles, you're more likely to make incremental progress. I think immigration is exhibit A of that. I think if we can take bite-sized pieces towards the goal that we all want, well, I should say the most Americans want, certainly I think Tom and I want, is we want a secure border and we want a just becoming system of immigration that's becoming of America's history of being a land of immigrants that everybody wants to come to. Not one, but both. I think the last administration failed on the former. This administration is failing on the latter. And that's why people are so frustrated. And that's what causes situations that, like the tragedy in Minneapolis, which was a tinderbox waiting to explode. Yeah. It really was. And it's so sad. It's so unfortunate. It never needed to happen, never should have happened. But to answer your question, Mari, what are we doing now? It's actually going to be a very, very busy 2 weeks on this topic. I hope a very healthy, productive 2 weeks that we can have healthy conversations about police community relations. After George Floyd, it was focused on local law enforcement. Now it's focused on federal law enforcement and getting back to the basics of policing being a social contract that requires mutual trust, respect, and cooperation between the public and the law enforcement institutions. If there's not trust, and that trust is not a two-way street, that social contract breaks down. And that's what we're seeing now on the federal side with ICE. So, Tom and I, I'm sure, agree on probably most, if not all, the reforms that need to be taking place. We wrote a letter to the president suggesting as much. Hopefully, we're going to be voting that way in the next 10 days here.
Tom, what is the current reality changing the calculus of what's possible on the Hill right now?
Right now, the big focus is, of course, ICE. I mean, that's what everybody's focused on, this awful behavior, I think immoral and illegal behavior that's taking place. And that's the big debate in Washington right now. And that's where the leadership on both sides are focused. I'm hoping that from this crisis situation we're in, we can do something much bigger and broader on the different problems that we face. You have to remember one of the challenges with why this has been so difficult for so long is, you look at this time 2 years ago, during the presidential election. There were still people streaming across the border. And really, the Republicans have had the Democrats on the run about open borders. And the Democrats saying, let's make a deal, let's do something, let's get something done to do three things: secure the border, fix the broken asylum system, and treat people like human beings and legalize a bunch of people. Those are the three big elements. And the Democrats say, let's make a deal, let's make a deal. Now the Democrats kind of have the Republicans on the run because everybody's mortified about what they're seeing in their social media feeds about behavior of ICE out in Minnesota and even stuff before that. And so there, you get this crazy incentive system where it's like, hey, we're winning. The Republicans on the open border, we're winning on this issue. We don't need to make a deal. We're winning on the Democrats. We're winning on this issue. Brian and I are in the business of, hey, let's actually try and solve this problem and make people's lives better. And I think that there's a time now where, President Trump can be a real hero in that he's secured the border. Okay, it's a big plus in what he's accomplished. And we should do things to make that permanent, that the border will be secured. A big part of that is fixing the broken asylum system so that you can't just come streaming across the border and incentivize the cartels to push all these people through the border where they're making billions of dollars or were making billions of dollars. But third, the most important thing for me is we've got to figure out, if you've been here for 10 years or more and you haven't committed any crime but for not having the proper documentation, we have to do what the president actually said. We've got to use some common sense. We've got these good people who are working very hard. He talked mainly about agriculture and hospitality, and they may not have the proper documentation, but let's use some common sense and actually address this problem. If we could get the president to actually give the okay to his team and say, let's do that, we could get this deal done tomorrow. Because I guarantee if we put something on the floor that was secure border, fix asylum, and legalize a bunch of people that have been here for more than 10 years that haven't committed any crimes, and fix things like you were talking about with E-Verify and other related things, we'd get this thing overwhelmingly bipartisan. But we've got to break through this law of politics, which is like, who's got the advantage right now and how are we going to win on the issue as opposed to actually fixing the problem.
Lightning round before we wrap up, because I know we have you for a short period of time. What is the most likely pathway for solutions, or will the midterm dynamics get us caught up into leveraging this as a wedge issue into the midterm? And I'll start with you, Tom, and then you, Brian.
I think there's a lot of people that want to use this as a wedge issue right now, and I don't want that. Brian doesn't want that. A lot of members of Congress don't want that. I think that we have to take this crisis we're going through right now, and it is a crisis. This awful treatment of people. People are all for deporting criminals, but they don't like breaking the window of somebody's car and dragging them out and beating them up. They don't like the raids in people's houses. They want you to go after the gangsters, not the grandmas. They want you to go after the. They don't want you going after the landscapers. Let's figure out. People who are going to work 6 days a week and going to church on Sunday, they've been here a long time. Let's figure out, how do we legalize those folks? Let's make sure we keep the border secure. Let's make sure we fix the broken asylum system and go after the cartels who are really the bad actors here. But also, let's treat people like human beings. Let's build a coalition like you're doing, Maury, and we love what Braver Angels is doing. We're so grateful to you. Let's build a coalition of business, badges, and the Bible, and work together to treat people like human beings and actually solve this problem, improve our economy, help law enforcement, and be good for our souls and make America a beacon of hope again.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, oftentimes we see out of horrible tragedies is born some light at the end of the tunnel, some silver lining in the clouds. After 9/11, our country treated each other so much better. So people were opening doors for each other. People were seeing the humanity in other people because they realized how short life was. After George Floyd, we had, I thought, tremendously productive conversations about policing in America and how people of color view law enforcement different than other people based on their experiences. Our hope out of Minnesota is that we now have that conversation with regard to federal immigration officers. I'm sure Tom and I are going to agree on most, if not all, of the reforms that need to happen. I'm sure you've discussed them. They've been out in the public on what we need to do to rebuild that trust, that social contract between the public, federal law enforcement, and local law enforcement. That's my hope. And Tom and I really, yeah, he's right. There are plenty of people that try to politicize everything. Typically, they're at the leadership level. That's what they do, unfortunately. You do have a lot of people that just are sick and tired of that. Who cares who's in the majority? Who cares who wins the midterms? If you're just going to get talking points on one side or the other, right? I mean, what our group cares about is actually driving something across the finish line or doing our damnedest to make it happen, even though sometimes we don't have the numbers to do it. A lot of people are mistaken in believing, well, there's only a 2-vote, margin. There's 50 of you could be steering the ship. Well, what they don't understand is that oftentimes a policy that's supported by Tom and I and our group of members will be rejected by large groups, both on the left and the right? So they join together to overcome what we believe, which is generally a two-party solution, because it's not liberal enough for the progressive Democrats, not conservative enough for the Freedom Caucus. So they all vote no, right? So that's the challenge we have on our hands.
Well, we appreciate that and appreciate the feedback and the courage it takes to stand up for what you do. And we're going to close out with some takeaways. If you're able to stay for a couple minutes, we'd love your take.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to Rena as we close this out here to get the takeaways across the board. And I'd love when you give your takeaway, if you give 1 or 2 words to the couple thousand Americans at least that will see this now, and then the others that watch it later, what that advice would be. So, Rena?
I'd like to start with the community panel. David, will you please tell us what's your takeaway from the evening in about a minute? What's your takeaway?
Yeah, when it comes to immigration, what's most difficult about making change is sometimes the polar opposites when it comes to the issue. Within this panel, I didn't see excessive polarization, but there are things where I know that one side will say, no, I'm not for that. And the other side will say, well, definitely, I need that. As the members of Congress were talking, they gave some possible solutions, but I see how much resistance they're receiving from their own side. This happens in our community, with our neighbors, which is why realistically, it's so difficult to change our immigration policies.
Thank you. Jorge, will you speak, please?
Yeah, honestly, my greatest takeaway from this conversation with both the panelists, our congressional members, and then even lobbyists that are on the panel, kind of advocating, saying we have an understanding of the inadequacies of the system, but we're just tied up with the two-party system. It's heartening to hear that we do have a pathway forward, but we're stopped by ourselves. So I feel like my greatest takeaway from this is that we have solutions, we're just reluctant to implement them because we don't want to fix it. Kind of like what Gabby was saying. My own Senator, John Curtis, profits off of ICE policies and ICE contracts through action targets. So I feel like fundamentally, if we have an understanding of the issue, how to fix it, with 2 congressional members here saying, yes, we agree on how to do this, and we would have bipartisan support with the bill, why aren't we doing it? My greatest takeaway is that we're only holding ourselves back.
Okay, I'm going to have the 4 roundtable panelists speak and then the congressional representatives. So, Gabby, can you tell us your takeaway? 30 seconds, please.
Yes. Well, my takeaway is that nothing happens without us. And we need change so badly in our country. We have to raise our voices. We have to show up and we have to make it happen. And for that reason, I am just so grateful to Braver Angels, to the people who are listening here. And I hope that the words that everybody shared today really helps people take action, really helps people come together we're all virtually saying the same thing. I told, joking around, the folks weren't able to see this, but in our chat to Jim, Teresa, and Peter, I'm like, man, if they just allowed us to come together, work with Congressman Fitzpatrick and Congressman Swassey, we would get this done in a heartbeat. So please use your voice.
Okay, Teresa.
I'm going to go back to something that Mari said at the beginning, and Jorge kind of reminded me of this, which is the courageous citizenship in this moment is to act against the divisiveness. David said it. It's hard when it's all around you and everyone wants you to pick a side, and they get mad at you if you haven't picked the side. The courageous thing to do is to say, this isn't about sides. This is about America. I watched the opening ceremonies of the Olympics today, and we are Team USA. All of us. And so to those who are listening, to those of us who've been doing this for a long time, to our members of Congress, I think the courageous thing to do is to speak up in favor of doing something, of getting it moving, not just standing on the sides and yelling, but actually getting it moving.
Thank you.
Amen, Teresa.
Peter.
Yes. Well, I really welcome the good vibes and the willingness to engage here. But I have to sound a more somber note because I think there's a lot of angry people out there in America who have reason to be angry about our immigration system and with immigrants. Not always the reasons that they articulate, but this problem has been building and building for decades, and people who have had concerns and anxieties about immigration, albeit often misarticulated, offensively articulated, they've been ignored and demeaned. And that's why Donald Trump is in office and doing what he's doing. And I don't hear anyone here tonight really addressing that. And I don't hear anybody tonight really addressing those people. I like to think we'd have a chance at reaching out to them, but they're not part of this conversation, and we can't ignore them.
Thank you. Jim.
Well, I'll end on a sunnier note. I think when nation citizens stop believing in the country, when people become members of tribes rather than understanding that we Americans are one tribe, then things go badly. And if we need to have the faith in ourselves and in our country that we can recover, we can trust our leaders, and we can trust our institutions again. We need to take that leap of faith, because then we can come together. I love the pragmatism, the spirit of pragmatism we hear tonight. And if we are less ideological and we're more pragmatic, we can get things done. And it will take the leadership of Congress to get us through, because the Constitution gives them the all power on setting immigration policy for this country.
Thank you. And now I'd like to hear from Representative Fitzpatrick. What is your takeaway from the evening?
My takeaway is you are fabulous people, and I wish we could clone and replicate you all. And you could all move to my district. That's my takeaway. No, these are the conversations that are so critically important to the preservation of our democracy. It is that simple. If you study our founders, and they had, if you read the Federalist Papers, they really had two prerequisites, presuppositions, two of them, when they drafted this document that has served our country well for so long, and that has led to us being the world's economic military superpower and the world's currency standard. Number one is full and active participation by the electorate, and number two is that we are always more unified together, standing against an external common, counterforce or enemy, than we are divided amongst ourselves. And George Washington, in his 1796 farewell address, when he did the unthinkable and he stepped down, he voluntarily relinquished power, which set our country on a whole different trajectory than it otherwise would have been, which is a tradition every president honored up until FDR, who served 4 terms and died in office, at which point Congress passed the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution. But one of the things that he very prophetically said in his farewell address was he was concerned about the emergence of a second political party. So at the time, they were just the Federalists. They were all that existed. Towards the end of his tenure, there was a party cropping up, and it was called the Democratic Republican Party. That was what it was called. And he was concerned that political parties inside the United States are inherently divisive and would ultimately become tribal in nature and cause internal division. And the founding, the sort of the precursors of our Constitution never envisioned that, didn't contemplate it, and didn't want it. And here we are about to celebrate our 250th birthday, very polarized, very tribal because of parties. And the parties don't even really mean much anymore. You look at, and I'm sure you're all getting in these feeds in your social media, some of the comments that were made by President Obama, President Clinton about immigration. It sounds like exactly what Donald Trump's saying now, right? And you look at presidents that Republicans revere, like Ronald Reagan, probably could not survive a Republican primary today. John F. Kennedy could probably not survive a Democrat party primary today. Why? The parties change. So the parties are constantly changing. Why are we following parties? And aren't the parties really just becoming cults? Cults of groupthink, where people go to get reinforcement of their already pre-existing paradigms. Independent thinking and being your own person is very, very important. Seeing the humanity in every other single human being is important. And having civil dialogue, respectful civil dialogue like you all have, is the key ingredient to the preservation of our country, more so than anything else. Teresa said it perfectly. So I just want to thank you all for having us. Thank you for partnering with us. We consider us part of your family. Tom and I can promise you agree on virtually everything, you guys believe in, which is open dialogue and trying to get to a solution by seeing the world through other people's eyes, seeing the humanity in every other person.
Thank you. Representative Spicy. Yeah.
I'll also say thank you to Braver Angels. Everybody who thinks that the problems in America are simple don't know what they're talking about. Anybody who says, why don't you just? There is no why don't you just. You need people who may disagree with each other, people of goodwill, like the people on this call, who say, well, I think this. And they say, well, I think that. Well, how about this? Well, how about that? Well, how about that? And you find that common ground. That's what you try to do with Braver Angels. That's what Brian and I try and do in the Problem Solvers Caucus. That's what we need more people doing. And I'm hopeful that we can get something done because most people do agree. I talk not only with people in the Problem Solvers Caucus, I'm talking to some very conservative Republicans. I'm talking to an evangelical Republican from Alabama. And he told me his life story the other day. And he says, I really believe that Americans have a sense of fairness. He said, when I was in the 1950s, my dad lost his job in Alabama, and he took me and my brothers and sisters up to Michigan to get a job. And people made fun of us because he had no education, and we had our thick accents, and people thought we were a bunch of yokels and really were mean to us. He said, but after a couple of years, we went back to Alabama. He said any self-respecting parent would try and bring their kids to a place to find a better job so he could raise their family. The same as my family. That's an evangelical Republican conservative from the Deep South who says he wants to have a sense of fairness in our country, to try and legalize people and have them pay restitution, but do it in a fair way so we can treat people like human beings. There's a lot of people like that that want to do that in our country. And we have to get beyond this bomb throwing and just have conversations. There's another guy's a Navy SEAL from Texas who, served in the military with a bunch of dreamers. And he's like, it's not fair. I've got thousands of dreamers in my district. And I don't see why they have to be living in fear like this all the time. But we need to get the Democrats and the Republicans talking to each other and understanding where they're coming from. And that's happening. That work is happening. And I'm hopeful that because of the good work of the people like Braver Angels, because of the problem solvers, because of people that of goodwill who may disagree with each other on some things, can find common ground here. It's really pretty straightforward. So we just have to keep on working at it. I love this country. I'm the son of an immigrant. My father was born in Italy, lived a great American success story. It kills me. It's painful to me that immigration has become a negative issue in our country, because my whole life is viewed through the lens of immigration and the American dream. And I want to get back to a place where we are the place that the whole world looks at and says, wow, what a country America is, where you can go, you can't be born in Paris and you become a Frenchman. You can't be born in Italy, in Rome, and become an Italian. You can't be born in Moscow and become a Russian, but you can be born anywhere in the world and come to America and become an American if you believe in the ideas this country is based upon. And we just need to get back to a place where we respect that and honor that again.
I appreciate these words. And my takeaway is very simple. It's the power of story. That when we hear each other's stories, we can understand where somebody's coming from. We can relate to them as another human being and find agreement. And Maury, will you please give us your takeaway for the evening?
Just gratitude for the goodwill of the folks here and the willingness. Peter, I'm glad you called out and said that, and what we need to focus on, and really these principles and the courage to stand up and stay at the table. That's what we need. And I'm just grateful for the conversation here tonight. And it's not easy, but we got to keep doing it.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to hand this over to David. David Latt.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to share a couple of next steps that people can take in their communities. First, we noted that this conversation tonight is part of the Citizens Commission on Immigration. It's a multi-year effort. We've already held almost 50 events across the country, including a Common Ground workshop in Representative Swazi's district, and then a conversation with Representative Swazi in which the constituents shared their Common Ground findings with him. So first, organize or participate in a Common Ground workshop on immigration. About 7 Reds and 7 Blues will spend several hours sharing stories and perspectives, ultimately finding unanimous points of agreement on immigration. Then Braver Angels will help you and the other participants from that workshop seek a follow-up meeting with their local member of Congress to share the points of agreement. Second, the Community Forum on Immigration is a new Braver Angels event. It's modeled much after the way we did this here tonight. It emphasizes reflection, storytelling, and connection across diverse experiences and viewpoints. And it can be run even by groups who might not have a trained Braver Angels moderator. And then if you think your community could benefit from courageous disagreement about immigration or deportation policy, our debate team has developed some tools to help you host a local community debate. They worked with experts and leaders to craft 6 resolutions that capture salient disagreements between Americans about deportation policy. And you can find them using the Debate Resolution Bank tool and filtering for resolutions about immigration. And then finally, you're invited to join February 19th, a Braver Angels debate on should ICE be abolished. At that online debate, anyone in the Zoom room will be able to raise their hand to make a speech either for or against the resolution. And as with all Braver Angels debates, the point of this debate is not for one side to defeat the other side, but to understand each other a little bit better. And all are welcome to join, and all are welcome to raise their hand to make a speech at that debate. So what we have done here tonight, this is the Citizen to Congress highway. This is what we have had here is we've had a conversation with ordinary citizens at the community level, experts and leaders from across the spectrum, members of Congress. This is a national conversation from local communities to DC about what we can do to improve and update our immigration policies, to find common ground. We invite you to join the conversation, participate in this initiative. So with that, very good to be here with you all, and let's go out there and build a house united. Good night, everyone.